The old pickup truck, a faithful rattling relic that had seen better decades, finally coughed to a stop outside the iron gates of the Sapphire Manor. 20 years. 2 decades since I, Davina Carter, had last breathed the manicured air of Willow Creek, a town that existed in a perpetual state of polished perfection. It wasn't a small town like the corn-swept expanses of Nebraska I'd become accustomed to, but a wealthy enclave of sprawling estates and hushed expectations, nestled snugly in the quiet hills of upstate New York. This was where my family, the Carters, reigned with an iron fist clad in velvet. Killed the engine. The silence that followed was unnerving, broken only by the distant whir of lawnmowers and the faint chime of an unseen clock tower. My fingers, calloused from years of working a small, independent vineyard, traced the delicate silver chain around my neck, a small sapphire pendant, my grandmother Ilara's favorite. It was a tangible piece of the warmth I sought, a stark contrast to the cold formality that awaited. The manor itself loomed, a grand, imposing structure of gray stone and countless windows, reflecting the afternoon sun like a judging eye. It hadn't changed in the glossy photos I'd occasionally seen in society magazines, nor in the carefully curated updates my sister Serena would post online. But in person, it felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum of forgotten affections. My grandmother, Davina Carter, lived somewhere within its silent grandeur. Or rather, she existed there, a fading echo in the vast chambers of her mind, slowly consumed by the insidious tendrils of Alzheimer's. My last true connection to this place. I pushed open the heavy iron gate, its hinges groaning in protest, a sound that seemed to mirror my own reluctance. The gravel path crunched under my worn boots, a stark contrast to the perfectly sculpted hedges that lined the drive. As I approached the front door, it swung open. Serena stood there, a vision in an emerald silk dress, her smile as dazzling and artificial as the chandeliers glittering behind her in the foyer. "Davina, darling," she cooed, extending a perfectly manicured hand, not for a handshake, but as if to offer a delicate peace offering. Her eyes, however, were sharp, assessing like a customs agent inspecting contraband. "We weren't quite expecting you today. Such a spontaneous visit." "I told Mother I was coming," I replied, keeping my voice even. "And Grandmother." Serena's smile tightened. "Oh, Mother's been quite preoccupied. And Grandmother? Well, you know how she is. Her awareness fluctuates. It's best not to upset her routine." She gestured vaguely to a uniformed maid polishing a nearby statue. "Everything here is about routine. I'm here about Grandmother, Serena. And the vineyard." My grandmother, in a fit of fleeting lucidity 5 years ago, had formally willed her small, cherished vineyard, a property separate from the manor, to me. It was her rebellion, her last act of love, knowing my passion for the land. Serena's composure faltered for a fraction of a second. "The vineyard? Oh, that old thing. Mother and Father have been managing it, of course. For Grandmother's estate. It's quite the burden, actually. Especially with her condition." Her gaze flickered over my worn jeans and practical shirt, a silent judgment of my chosen life. "Perhaps we can discuss this after you've settled. You must be tired from your long drive." She made a move to close the massive mahogany door. I stepped forward, blocking it with my foot. "I'm not leaving until I see Grandmother. And I want to see the papers regarding the vineyard. The will explicitly left it to me." Serena's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard glare, utterly devoid of the warmth she'd feigned. "Don't be ridiculous, Davina. Grandmother is unwell. And the vineyard is under the family's stewardship. You signed papers. Years ago." "I signed nothing regarding the vineyard, Serena. I was very clear about that." She scoffed. "You were a lost teenager, Davina. And now you're a farmer. You wouldn't understand the complexities of managing such assets. It was all handled appropriately. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a charity gala to plan." She tried to close the door with more force, but I held firm. "Not until I see Ilara," I stated, my voice low but resolute. My eyes met hers, holding, unwavering. She finally relented, a sigh of exasperation escaping her perfectly painted lips. "Fine," she snapped, her voice now a sharp whisper. "But don't upset her. And don't bring up anything unsettling. Her doctors insist on a calm environment." She led me through the cavernous foyer, past polished marble and gilt-edged portraits of grim-faced Carters, ancestors who seemed to stare down with silent disapproval. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies and old money, devoid of the familiar comfort of home. Every step felt like walking through a museum, cold and unfeeling. The house was impeccable, yet sterile, a testament to my parents' obsession with control and appearance. My father, Richard Carter, a prominent judge known for his stern demeanor, and my mother, Eleanor, a socialite who cultivated an image of philanthropic grace, had always prioritized the family's public facade above all else. We reached a sunroom at the back, filled with expensive orchids and a faint scent of antiseptic. Ilara sat by a large window, a delicate lace shawl draped over her shoulders, her silver hair meticulously styled. Her eyes, once so bright and full of life, were clouded, distant, occasionally flickering with a spark of recognition before fading again. She held a worn copy of Wuthering Heights, a book she'd read to me countless times as a child. "Grandmother," I said softly, approaching her chair. My throat tightened, the sight of her diminished state a punch to the gut. I knelt beside her, taking her frail hand in mine. It was cool, veined, no longer strong enough to knead bread or prune roses. She looked at me, her gaze wavering. "Kitty," she whispered, her voice thin, fragile. Kitty was her childhood cat. "It's Davina, grandmother. You're Davina." I squeezed her hand gently, trying to ground her, to ground myself. A faint smile touched her lips, a ghost of her former warmth. "Davina, you're back. You look like the fields." Her eyes seemed to brighten for a moment, seeing past the present, remembering the vineyards, the soil. "The soil remembers." Tears pricked my eyes. "Yes, grandmother. The soil remembers." Serena, who had been hovering by the doorway, cleared her throat impatiently. "All right, Davina. That's enough. Grandmother needs her rest." I stood, my heart aching. This wasn't the vibrant woman who had taught me to identify wild herbs, whose laugh used to fill the manor's vast halls. This was a fragile echo, trapped in a gilded cage. But that fleeting glimmer of recognition, that mention of the fields, fueled a quiet fire within me. I had to fight for her, for the legacy she tried to pass on. The fight, I quickly learned, was not just against Serena and my parents, but against the impenetrable wall of their respectability. Their carefully constructed facade of philanthropic grace and unimpeachable wealth. My first call was to Aunt Beatrice, Ilara's younger sister, the only family member who had openly supported my decision to leave Willow Creek for a life of purpose, not pretense. Beatrice lived a quiet life teaching literature at a university upstate. She answered with a gasp of surprise. "Davina, my dear, I heard you were back. I worried you'd never set foot in this town again." Her voice was warm, a balm to my raw nerves. I explained everything. Ilara's condition, the manor's sterile atmosphere, Serena's casual dismissal of my inheritance, the shocking plaque on the vineyard gates. "The vineyard?" Beatrice's voice sharpened. "That's preposterous." Ilara was adamant. She changed her will after Richard and Eleanor started pushing her to sell it for some ridiculous development opportunity. She wanted it to go to you, Davina. To someone who actually loved the land. "That's what I remember," I confirmed. "But Serena claims I signed something." "Nonsense. Ilara would have told me. She trusted you implicitly, Davina. More than anyone else in that house." Beatrice's disdain for the manor and its inhabitants was well known. "Look, I have a friend, Clara Jenkins. She's a brilliant property lawyer, specializes in elder abuse and inheritance fraud. She's not afraid of the Carters' money or their reputation. I'll call her immediately. You meet with her." The next morning, I drove to a modest office in a bustling university town, a refreshing change from the quiet, oppressive grandeur of Willow Creek. Clara Jenkins was a woman in her late 50s, with shrewd, kind eyes and a direct manner that put me immediately at ease. She listened patiently as I recounted my story, from my strained relationship with my parents to Alara's fading memory, to Serena's stonewalling. "The Carters are very powerful in this county, Davina," Clara warned, her gaze unwavering. "Judge Richard Carter casts a long shadow. And Eleanor, her charity work gives her immense social capital. They cultivate an image of impeccable integrity. Challenging them will be like chipping away at granite. But if what you say about Alara's original will and this supposed signature holds true, we have a case." Clara's first step was to obtain certified copies of all of Alara Carter's recent wills and any associated property transfers for the vineyard. She also requested a full financial audit of the vineyard's operations under my parents' management, citing irregularities in the property records. A week later, the documents arrived. The original will, meticulously drafted and notarized a decade ago, clearly bequeathed the vineyard to me. Then a codicil, dated just 2 years ago, modifying the will to transfer the vineyard to Richard and Eleanor Carter, in trust for the ongoing care of Alara Carter. And finally, a deed from 6 months ago, selling the vineyard from the Carter Family Trust to a holding company named Viridian Holdings LLC. "This codicil, this is where it gets murky," Clara explained, tracing a finger over the document. "It bears Alara's signature, but it looks forced. And the witness signatures are from 2 of the Manor's long-standing staff members, who might be coerced." My heart sank. My parents were smarter than a simple forgery. A codicil, witnessed by their own employees, would be much harder to challenge. "And Viridian Holdings LLC," Clara continued. "It's a shell company registered in Delaware, a notorious tax haven. Its sole managing member is a name I've seen before, Lyle Thorne. He's a known associate of a large real estate development consortium, one that's been eyeing prime upstate New York land for years. This isn't just about the vineyard, Davina. This is about larger development." Clenched my jaw. They were doing exactly what my gut had warned me. The vineyard wasn't just a small property. It was a stepping stone, a strategic piece of a larger puzzle. Alara's small, beloved vineyard, where she had spent her happiest hours, was being absorbed into a faceless corporate machine. Clara sent a formal letter to Richard and Eleanor Carter, notifying them of our intent to contest the codicil and the subsequent sale, demanding full transparency on all financial dealings related to the vineyard. The response was swift and chilling. A letter from the Carters' legal counsel, the formidable Sterling and Associates, a firm known for its cutthroat tactics. It was not just a denial, but a counter-threat. They would seek sanctions for frivolous litigation and pursue charges of harassment and defamation if I continued. The letter subtly hinted at my erratic past and strained family relations, a veiled warning that they would weaponize my personal history. "They're going to try and discredit you," Clara stated, her eyes sharp. "Paint you as a bitter, unstable black sheep. They'll try to argue you're mentally unfit to handle an inheritance, especially after your independent lifestyle." "My independent lifestyle built a successful vineyard from scratch," I retorted, my voice flat. "It taught me discipline, perseverance, and how to spot rotten soil." "Precisely. We use that. We turn their weapon against them. But first we need to prove that codicil is invalid. We need a forensic document analyst. And we need to talk to those witnesses." My parents' power, their control, always came from their image. My fight, I realized, wouldn't just be in a courtroom. It would be in the court of public opinion. The whispers began subtly at first. An old friend from high school, whom I'd run into at a local diner, avoided eye contact, mumbling excuses about being too busy. A shopkeeper, usually chatty, suddenly seemed preoccupied when I entered his store. The social channels where Clara Jenkins had cautiously begun to release information about the vineyard dispute became battlegrounds of anonymous comments, disparaging my character, questioning my motives, suggesting I was merely after money. "She was always a troubled child," one comment read. "Left her family without a word for years, then comes back demanding an inheritance. Sounds like a gold digger. Military life probably messed with her head," another added. Poor Ilara, taken advantage of in her old age. It was the Carters' subtle, insidious smear campaign, expertly crafted to undermine my credibility. They were using my long absence, my chosen path, as proof of my supposed instability. It stung far more than I cared to admit. The isolation I'd grown accustomed to in the military, the distance from family, was now being twisted into a weapon against me. But this was familiar territory. I'd faced far more dangerous psychological operations in my former life. I knew how to counter-target. My priority was still Ilara. I found a way to visit her at the manor, slipping past Serena's watchful eyes during a flurry of activity for a last-minute charity event. She was sitting in the sunroom, gazing out at the meticulously kept rose gardens, a serene, distant look on her face. Her book lay forgotten in her lap. "Grandmother," I whispered, taking her hand. This time she didn't mistake me for a cat or an old friend. She looked at me, and for a precious few seconds, her eyes were clear, lucid, filled with a deep, knowing sadness. "Davina," she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it. "The vineyard, protect it. It's my heart. They wanted to pave it over. For concrete. For money." Her voice faded, the clarity dimming, but the message was searingly clear. "The sapphire, keep it safe." "I will, grandmother," I vowed, tears blurring my vision. "I promise." She squeezed my hand, a flicker of her old strength returning, before her gaze clouded over once more. "Pretty roses, Kitty," she murmured, her mind retreating to a safer place. That brief, lucid moment ignited a fresh fire in my resolve. It confirmed every suspicion. They were selling the vineyard for large-scale development, not for Ilara's care. And she knew. She had fought them in her own way. I immediately called Clara Jenkins. "The codicil," I said, my voice urgent. "Ilara told me. She fought them. She told me to protect the vineyard from concrete." She was lucid, Clara. And she knew. That's powerful, Davina. Her brief moments of lucidity could be critical in court, especially combined with forensic evidence. Clara paused. "About that." The forensic analyst found significant inconsistencies in the codicil signature. It suggests a guiding hand, someone forcing Ilara's hand while she signed. Not a complete forgery, but coercion. My stomach churned. Coercion. My parents forcing a frail, fading woman to sign away her legacy. The depths of their ambition sickened me. "And the witnesses? Both long-term manor staff," Clara confirmed. "A gardener and a chef. We've sent them subpoenas for deposition. They'll be pressured, but we'll prepare them. We'll offer them protection if they tell the truth." My thoughts turned to the social media smear campaign. It wasn't just an annoyance. It was strategic. They were trying to poison the well, to make any eventual testimony I gave sound like the ravings of a disgruntled family member. I decided to fight fire with fire, but with truth as my weapon. I contacted a small, independent online newspaper, the Willow Creek Watchdog, known for its investigative journalism and willingness to challenge local power structures. I had followed their work from afar, admiring their tenacity. I arranged a meeting with their editor, a grizzled veteran journalist named Arthur Finch. I brought him everything. Certified copies of Ilara's wills, the suspicious codicil, the details of Viridian Holdings, and my own military service records. I showed him the photo of Ilara and me, taken years ago at the vineyard, her face alight with joy. I told him about the hospice nurse, Mrs. Gable, who had quietly expressed concerns about Ilara's care to me years ago before being abruptly dismissed by my parents. I told him about the Sapphire Manor's cold sterility, the sudden staff changes, the isolated sunroom. And I told him about Ilara's brief, lucid moment, her plea to protect the vineyard. Arthur listened, his expression neutral, occasionally scribbling notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "The Carters are powerful, Ms. Vance. They'll come down on us like a ton of bricks. We'll need irrefutable proof. Not just your word." "I'll get it for you," I promised. "I'm a cyber forensics analyst, Mr. Finch." I know how to find buried truths. And I have resources. I mentioned Kayla, hinting at a larger network of support without revealing specifics. If they're using shell companies, there are digital trails. If there's coercion, there are communications. I'll provide you with enough to make their perfect facade crack. He looked at me for a long moment, a glint of respect in his eyes. All right, Ms. Vance. I'm interested. We'll run with it. But you need to understand, once this goes public, there's no going back. The Carters will retaliate with everything they have. Good, I said, a grim satisfaction settling in my gut. Let them. It's time Willow Creek saw the real Carters. The article broke 2 days later, not on social media, but on the front page of the Willow Creek Watchdog's website, quickly picked up by local news channels. The headline was damning. Willow Creek Sapphire under siege. Local veteran alleges fraud and elder abuse against prominent Carter family. Vineyard at risk. It meticulously laid out the accusations. The conflicting wills, the suspected coercion, the shadowy holding companies, the potential environmental impact of the development. It featured a quote from me, direct and unyielding. My grandmother cherished that vineyard. My parents are sacrificing her legacy and the future of this community for greed. The carefully cultivated silence of Willow Creek shattered. Phone lines buzzed. Neighbors gossiped. Suddenly, the anonymous smears on social media were drowned out by voices of support, questions, and dawning outrage. People who had known Ilara, who remembered her kindness and her love for the land, began to speak up, confirming her strong will and her passion for the vineyard. My parents' public image, once unassailable, began to crumble, brick by meticulously crafted brick. The response from the Carter family legal team was immediate and furious. A scathing press release denouncing the article as malicious slander and the desperate ramblings of a troubled individual. They threatened to sue the Willow Creek Watchdog into oblivion. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The illusion of perfection had been pierced. And for the first time in a long time, as I sat in my small rental, watching the local news discuss the Sapphire under siege, I felt a profound sense of purpose. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about exposing a deeper rot, protecting a legacy, and perhaps finding my own place in a world that had once seemed to have no room for me. The battle had escalated, and I was ready. The fallout from the Willow Creek Watchdog article was immediate and seismic. The elegant facade of the Carter family, so meticulously maintained for decades, had developed a hairline crack, then a jagged fissure. Public opinion, once swayed by their carefully crafted image, now wavered. Eleanor Carter, my mother, who usually thrived in the spotlight of her charity galas, was spotted by reporters ducking into her car, her usual composed smile replaced by a grimace. My father, Judge Richard Carter, typically unflappable, was reported to have abruptly recessed a court session, citing an unforeseen personal matter. The whispers in Willow Creek had turned into open questions. My phone, previously silent from family, now buzzed with messages from Serena. They weren't cooing demands anymore, but frantic, accusatory texts. Davina, stop this. You're destroying everything. Father is having heart palpitations. Mother is distraught. I read them but didn't reply. My resolve had hardened. Their distress was a consequence of their actions, not a reason for me to back down. Clara Jenkins, my lawyer, was both thrilled and wary. The press coverage is excellent, Davina. Puts pressure on them. But it also paints a larger target on your back. Marcus Sterling is not known for taking public scrutiny well. She was right. Marcus Sterling, Bethany's husband, was a man who preferred to operate in the shadows. His deals as opaque as possible. The public exposure was anathema to him. My intuition, honed by years of anticipating threats in the digital realm, screamed that they would retaliate. Not just legally but personally. My prediction proved accurate sooner than expected. The next day, 2 men, sharply dressed and radiating an unsettling aura of professional menace, appeared at Clara Jenkins's office. They introduced themselves as investigators from Sterling and Associates, Marcus's legal firm, but their demeanor suggested something far more sinister. They politely yet firmly suggested that Clara drop the case, hinting at severe financial repercussions, prolonged legal battles, and a complete decimation of her reputation. Clara, however, was no pushover. She met their veiled threats with a steely calm, informing them that such intimidation would only serve as further evidence of obstruction of justice. They left, but their message was clear. The gloves were off. Later that evening, as I was leaving my rental, I noticed a sleek, dark SUV parked down the street. Its windows were tinted, and the engine purred faintly. It was subtly out of place in the quiet, residential neighborhood. I didn't see anyone inside, but I felt eyes on me. It was a familiar sensation, one that brought back memories of covert operations, of being surveilled. This wasn't just the police or even private investigators. This felt like the reach of the silent hand, Kayla's unsettling discovery. Called Kayla. They're circling Kay. I'm feeling eyes on me. Expected. I traced some suspicious activity near your rental IP. It's a very sophisticated monitoring package, top tier. Not your average PI. It screams organized crime funding, just like the transfers to that Nevada firm. Any more on Viridian Holdings or Lyle Thorne? That's the interesting part, Kayla said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The Delaware registration for Viridian Holdings. The listed address is a virtual office, no surprise there. But I cross-referenced Lyle Thorne's known associates and business activities. He's been linked to a series of eco-resort developments in protected wilderness areas across the country. And every single one of those projects has faced massive environmental opposition, eventually getting railroaded through with special permits or quiet legislative changes. It's always the same pattern. Obscure LLCs buy up land, then a construction firm comes in, suddenly gets permits despite local outcry, and by the time anyone can stop them, the habitat is destroyed. And the Carters are helping them do this in Willow Creek. It looks like they're the local facilitators, the respectable face that smooths over the initial land acquisitions, leverages their influence to get past local opposition. Your grandmother's vineyard, with its prime location near the watershed, was likely a critical piece of their larger plan for a massive ecotourism development. They wanted to control key access points to the undisturbed land. The depth of their treachery, the casual destruction of pristine land for profit, sickened me. My grandmother, Ilara, had loved the natural beauty of Willow Creek with a quiet passion. Her vineyard was a testament to that. My parents, ostensibly her caregivers, were literally paving over her legacy. Kayla, I said, my voice cold with resolve. I need you to find every single piece of communication between Richard, Eleanor, and Serena Carter with Lyle Thorne or anyone from Viridian Holdings. Every email, every text, every meeting scheduled through their personal assistants. I want proof of their direct involvement in this larger scheme, not just the vineyard fraud. That's a big ask, Davina. They're smart. They use burner phones, secure channels. But I'll look for any breadcrumbs, any accidental overlaps. Our legal battle moved to the discovery phase. This was where we demanded access to their documents, financial records, and compelled key witnesses to testify under oath. It was a tedious, grueling process, designed to expose every detail, no matter how hidden. The two Manor staff who had witnessed the codicil, an elderly gardener named Mr. Henderson and the head chef, Ms. Patel, were terrified. They met with Clara Jenkins under strict confidentiality agreements. Mr. Henderson, his hands gnarled from decades of working Ilara's gardens, spoke haltingly. Mrs. Carter, she was very weak that day. Mr. Richard. He just kept putting the pen in her hand, saying, "Just sign here, mother, just here." She kept trying to pull away. Her hand. It was shaking so much. Ms. Patel, a stern but compassionate woman, corroborated his story. They said it was a necessary formality for her care. But her eyes, they were so distant. She wouldn't have understood what she was signing. Not fully. Their testimony, though difficult to extract, was invaluable. It confirmed the coercion. It proved Ilara was not fully cognizant when the codicil was signed. But the Carters fought back with brutal efficiency. Richard Carter, leveraging his judicial connections, pushed for an expedited closed-door hearing to challenge the public nature of the ongoing investigation, citing defamation and privacy concerns. He wanted to get the press off their backs, to pull the shroud of secrecy back over their actions. Eleanor, meanwhile, launched a public counteroffensive, increasing her charity donations, hosting lavish events, and making tearful appearances where she spoke of the stresses of caring for an ailing parent, and the unfortunate and hurtful accusations from a misguided family member. Serena posted saccharine photos of the family, projecting an image of unity and unwavering devotion to Ilara. They were masters of narrative control. I knew I needed something irrefutable, something that would cut through their polished lies and expose their true intentions. Something that went beyond just the vineyard. My opportunity came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Gable, Ilara's former hospice nurse, whom I'd mentioned to Arthur Finch. She contacted the Willow Creek watchdog after seeing the article, her conscience finally overriding her fear. She met me and Arthur in a discreet, anonymous location. Mrs. Gable was a quiet, unassuming woman, but her eyes held a fire of indignation. "I was with Mrs. Carter for almost a year," she began, her voice low. She had moments of clarity, brief ones. And during one of those, she tried to give me something. "Small lockbox," she whispered. "They'll take it. For the concrete." Before I could understand, Mrs. Eleanor Carter entered, furious, and dismissed me on the spot, accusing me of interfering with family matters. "Do you know what was in the box?" asked, my heart pounding. Mrs. Gable shook her head. "No, I never opened it." But she clutched it fiercely. "And she only ever called me her protector," she kept repeating. "The sapphire, protect the sapphire. My sapphire pendant. My grandmother's favorite gem. What did it mean? What was in that box? Did you see where the box went?" Arthur pressed. "I saw Mrs. Eleanor Carter take it. She was very agitated. She locked it in the main study, in a wall safe behind the large painting of the Carter's patriarch. My grandmother, even in her fading mind, had been trying to leave me a final, crucial message. A hidden piece of the puzzle. The sapphire was more than just the jewel I wore. It was a secret, a symbol of a truth she wanted me to find." Armed with Mrs. Gable's testimony, Clara filed an emergency motion to obtain a court order for discovery of the contents of the safe in Ilara's study, citing Mrs. Gable's sworn affidavit about Ilara's attempt to transfer the box. My parents' lawyers vehemently opposed, arguing invasion of privacy and a baseless fishing expedition. But Judge Wallace, a man who respected direct testimony and had seen too many attempts at obstruction, granted our motion. The day the court-appointed officers arrived at the Sapphire Manor, accompanied by Clara and myself, was a spectacle. Reporters, tipped off by Arthur Finch, swarmed the gates. Eleanor and Serena were waiting, their faces white with fury, but utterly powerless against the court order. "This is an outrage," Eleanor hissed, her voice trembling. "You have no right to invade my home, Davina. This is purely vindictive." "This is justice, Mother," I replied, my voice calm, unwavering. "And this is for Ilara." The officers located the safe behind the painting in the study. It was a modern digital safe. Eleanor refused to provide the code. But the court order stipulated forced entry if necessary. As the officers prepared their tools, something clicked in my mind. Ilara's brief moments of lucidity, her love for riddles, her subtle clues. The sapphire, keep it safe. And her love for literature. "Wait," I said, stepping forward. "I think I know the code." Eleanor scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous, Davina. You haven't lived here in 20 years. But I remembered Ilara's passion for gems, her love for numbers, her subtle wit. The sapphire, the blue birthstone for September, the month of her birth, and the numerical value of sapphire on some ancient gem charts. The year her beloved vineyard was first planted, a detail only she and I knew. I approached the safe, my fingers hovering over the keypad. I tried a sequence of numbers, a combination of dates and numerical values associated with sapphires and Ilara's personal history. The safe clicked open. Eleanor gasped, her eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. Serena stared, speechless. Inside the safe, nestled on a velvet lining, was a small, ornate wooden box. And inside that box, beneath a handful of loose sapphires, lay a sealed, yellowed envelope. It contained not another will, but a series of handwritten letters from Ilara, addressed to me, and a detailed, meticulously kept journal. The first letter was dated 5 years prior, just after she had changed her will to leave me the vineyard. "My dearest Davina," it read in her elegant, flowing script, "I know your parents will fight this. They crave control, and this vineyard, this beautiful land, is something they see only as a commodity. They are already pushing me to sell it for their development. But I want it to be yours. I have made a copy of my true will and kept it with Beatrice. But should anything happen, should they try to claim I was not of sound mind, know that I am lucid now, and I am fighting them. I fear they will try to take more than just the vineyard. They are involved in much larger schemes, Davina. Schemes that involve Viridian Holdings, and a man named Lyle Thorne. They are ruthless. Do not trust them. Find this journal. Holds the truth. Protect the land, my sapphire. It is everything." The journal detailed everything. Dates of meetings between Richard, Eleanor, Serena, and Marcus with Lyle Thorne. Clandestine plans for a massive eco-resort development that would involve diverting protected waterways, clear-cutting ancient forests, and lobbying for illegal zoning changes. It outlined payoffs, shell corporations, and the names of corrupt local officials who were on their payroll. It even contained the exact figures for the bribes paid to Martha Jenkins for the falsified codicil. And the final entry, dated just days before her significant decline into full Alzheimer's. "They tried to make me sign again today. For the main manor this time. I refused. I told them Davina will come. She will know. They do not understand her strength. My Davina. My sapphire." My breath hitched. They had tried to take everything. The entire manor. I handed the journal and the letters to Clara. She scanned them, her face growing grimmer with each page. "My God, Davina," she whispered, her eyes widening. "This isn't just fraud. This is racketeering. Conspiracy to defraud. Environmental felonies. Money laundering. And the extent of their planning. This is years in the making." Eleanor and Serena, who had watched me open the safe in stunned silence, finally saw the true weight of what I held. Eleanor's face went ashen, her carefully constructed composure disintegrating. Serena began to tremble. "Officers," Clara said, her voice cutting through the suddenly suffocating silence, "I believe this evidence warrants immediate action. Judge Carter's involvement, the scale of the corruption. This is federal." The lead officer, a seasoned veteran who had seen his share of local power players, nodded gravely. He picked up his radio. "Requesting immediate federal assistance. We have a situation here. Major fraud, potential racketeering. The Carters are involved." The courtroom was packed, not just with local reporters, but with network news vans parked outside. The story of the Sapphire Manor conspiracy had exploded onto the national stage. Ilara's journal, her last defiant act of lucidity, had become the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Richard, Eleanor, and Serena Carter sat at the defense table, their faces grim, their expensive lawyers whispering frantically in their ears. The composure, the arrogance, the polished perfection, had all dissolved under the harsh glare of truth. I stood on the witness stand, my hand raised, taking the oath. I didn't tremble. I was no longer the lost teenager, or the quiet soldier. I was Davina Carter, the one who saw, who fought, who refused to be erased. The prosecutor, a formidable federal attorney named Ms. Davies, began her questioning. "Ms. Carter, please describe how you came to possess these documents." I recounted everything. My return to Willow Creek, the forged codicil, the vineyard's imminent sale, the attempts to discredit me, Mrs. Gable's courageous testimony, and finally, the opening of Ilara's secret safe. My voice was calm, clear, factual, devoid of emotion, yet infused with an undeniable undercurrent of righteous indignation. Ms. Davies then turned to the journal. Ms. Carter, the journal details a vast conspiracy involving your family and Viridian Holdings. Do you believe this was solely for financial gain? It was for greed, yes, I testified. But it was also about control. They wanted to erase my grandmother's will, her wishes, her very memory, because she stood in the way of their ambition. They thought they could silence her, and then silence me. The prosecutor played audio recordings gathered by Kayla's team, culled from intercepted, encrypted communications that had accidentally leaked from a compromised LexCorp server. Conversations between Marcus Sterling and Lyle Thorne, explicitly discussing bribes to local officials, plans to divert waterways, and the problematic Ilara Vance. Her name, once synonymous with grace, was now uttered with chilling callousness. Then came the visual evidence. Satellite images pieced together by Kayla, showing the quiet encroachment of Viridian Holdings on the watershed land, the subtle clearing that had begun even before permits were granted. It was undeniable proof of their intent. Richard Carter, my father, who had maintained a facade of stoicism, finally broke. His face, usually a mask of judicial authority, was now pale and contorted. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw not anger, but a fleeting expression of regret, of a man utterly undone. Eleanor openly wept, her shoulders shaking. Serena stared straight ahead, a blank mask of disbelief. Ms. Davies turned to the judge. Your Honor, the evidence presented is clear. The Carter family, far from being the victims of a misguided relative, orchestrated a sophisticated, multi-layered criminal enterprise involving fraud, elder abuse, environmental exploitation, and possibly money laundering. They leveraged their positions of power and trust to systematically dismantle a beloved legacy for personal gain. This is not a family dispute. These are federal crimes. Judge Wallace, his face grim, slammed his gavel. Given the overwhelming and compelling evidence presented, the court finds sufficient cause to refer this case for immediate grand jury indictment. All existing asset freezes remain in effect. Furthermore, the court orders the immediate transfer of property ownership for 142 Sycamore Lane, including the vineyard, to Davina Carter, pending final resolution of the criminal proceedings. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I looked at Clara, who gave me a triumphant nod. We had not just won. We had exposed them utterly and irrevocably. As I left the courtroom, a crowd of reporters swarmed me, shouting questions. I looked at the cameras, then at the sky, a vast, clear blue stretching above Willow Creek. My grandmother taught me that the earth remembers, I said, my voice strong, resonating with a truth that had been buried for too long. And so do I. I didn't stay in Willow Creek. The manor, now a symbol of their downfall, held no warmth for me. I returned to the small, thriving vineyard that was now truly mine. I lived in the small farmhouse on the property, tending to the vines, feeling Ilara's presence in every rustling leaf, every patch of rich soil. Arthur Finch's Willow Creek watchdog became a national sensation. The story of the Sapphire Manor conspiracy sparked similar investigations in other wealthy enclaves, exposing hidden networks of environmental exploitation and elder abuse. Lyle Thorne was arrested, his entire development consortium under federal investigation. Marcus Sterling and Bethany faced a barrage of civil lawsuits and criminal charges. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, once the untouchable pillars of Willow Creek society, were now facing their own reckoning, stripped of their public offices and their carefully constructed reputations. Justice, a slow-moving but relentless force, was finally unearthing the roots of their decay. My relationship with Serena remained fractured, perhaps irrevocably, but I had found something more profound than family reconciliation. A fierce, unwavering integrity, a true purpose. I spent my days tending the vineyard, transforming it into a sanctuary, a place where people could connect with the land, learn about sustainable practices, and remember the quiet strength of my grandmother Ilara. I invited Mrs. Gable to come and work at the vineyard, caring for the land and for the small heirloom rose garden Ilara had loved. She accepted, her eyes shining. The manor's former gardener and chef, Mr. Henderson and Ms. Patel, also found a new home at the vineyard, their loyalty shifting from the cold Carters to the genuine warmth of a rediscovered purpose. They were my chosen family now, forged not by blood, but by shared truth and unwavering support. Sometimes I would find myself sitting on the porch of the farmhouse, sipping the rich, earthy wine from Ilara's vines, watching the sun set over the distant hills. I would hold the sapphire pendant, a quiet testament to her unwavering spirit. They had tried to erase her, tried to erase me, believing wealth and influence could silence any truth. But Ilara's legacy, like the deep roots of her vineyard, had only grown stronger through the struggle. And I, Davina Carter, was here to ensure it would never again be paved over. This was my home, my legacy, and my unwavering truth.